Hey, BiggerPockets, it's Matt. So today we're going to talk about something that's maybe not so happy, but it's something that's it's real. It's part of life, and it's what to do if your tenants die. And unfortunately, none of us are getting out of this thing alive. It's what happens to all of us, and unfortunately, it's going to happen to one of your tenants at some point. If you own property long enough, it will happen. It's happened to me several times. I've had several of my tenants die in my 12 years of being in this business. And it's crummy. Sometimes you develop deep personal relationships, but you get to be friends with some of your tenants if you manage yourself, and it stinks. But at the end of the day, there are certain ramifications and certain things we need to talk about of what you need to do when these things happen, right? So the first thing is you obviously you got to be human, and you want to give them certain. If this person has a family and all that, you want to have a heart when it comes to those types of things. Number one, that goes without saying, I would hope. But here is the business side of it, the landlord side of it. My hope is that you guys approach this side of it with heart, but with also understanding that you got to defend your business as well, right? So the first thing you want to do is, on all of our leases, we get an emergency contact. And so I think that a lot of other landlords don't do that. Okay, so if you find out the tenant dies before, like we've had some circumstances where we found out about it first, and other circumstances where a family member called us and said, hey, I am her daughter, and this is what happened, and I need to let you know because I need to get into her unit. So if you find out first, either way, you got to look through your lease and call the emergency contact. If you guys aren't getting emergency contacts for every one of your tenants, we get two, because number one, if the rent's not being paid, that's an emergency, because your family member or whoever this is may end up getting evicted, so you would want to know about it. So I call the emergency contact if the rent's not being paid. We also call the emergency contact if there's a safety issue, or if bad things happen, one way or the other. It's good to have this person that you can call and reach out to. So the first thing you want to do is reach out to the emergency contact and let them know what happened. They may know already, they may not know. It's important that you let them know, but also that you don't just go and let them into the property, because in any type of death, you've got the the executor, right? Okay. Now you need to find out who the executor is for this person's estate, for their assets and for their liabilities too. Here's why. If it's a month-to-month lease, okay, in most states, now you got to check your state law, but in most states, the lease cancels immediately if the tenant dies, okay? If it is a longer-term lease, a year, or it could be commercial, maybe this is a commercial operator of one of your storefronts that dies, that has like a 5-year lease or something like that. Either way, if it's not a month-to-month lease, the lease does not automatically cancel when the tenant dies. Who picks up the lease? The executor does. The estate of that tenant still becomes liable for the rent and becomes privy to the assets of the tenant, which includes the stuff inside the unit, but also liable to their liabilities. They're subject to those too. So if it's month to month, if the lease ends immediately, the executor has to remove the stuff, and they owe you whatever rent that there is from up until the time of them vacating the property. Now this is where the hard part comes in. Where you maybe can work with them, maybe not charge them to the end of the month, charge them to exactly the date they move out if you choose to, and just try and work with them a little bit if it's a month-to-month contract. But if it's a 1-year contract or more, okay, now this is where kind of people might leave nasty comments or whatever, but this is just part of landlording. The lease continues, and so the estate owes rent ongoing while the estate is cleaning up this person's assets and everything like that. And this executor is responsible for their estate. And so you need to contact them. You're not supposed to and the state law says this everywhere, you're not supposed to let anyone, any family member into the property until you know who this executor is. Because, you've had circumstances, I actually had a friend have this happen where he had one of his tenants die, and the tenants, both their sons, showed up at the landlord's office debating on who the landlord should give the keys to, this son or that son. I tell you what, That's a debate you don't want to be in the middle of. So you find out who the legal executor is, and you give that legal executor the keys. And if you really want to be really to the point on it, you get an agreement in writing from them on when they're going to get that tenant's stuff out of the apartment, how much they're going to pay you, just an agreement. Hey, listen, just so you know, here's the tenant's lease, which you're now liable to, right? And I will allow you to break this lease. Maybe the heart comes in. I'll allow you to break this lease, and you can get your deceased stuff out. And maybe if you want to be super fair about it, you can charge them rent up until the point where you get a new person in the space. That's very fair, very cut and dry. It's up to you and your feelings on it and what you want to do. But that's how you handle that. Now, you also want to check, like I said, you want to check state law, because I of course I Googled this before I did this video, and there's very different laws per state. I've read, the laws in Michigan are very different than the laws here in New Jersey. Here in New Jersey, you can't let the tenant, you can't extend this 1-year lease all the way out to the end of the lease. You have to give the executor a certain amount of time to get the stuff out. You can charge them for the rent, but you can't keep the lease going all the way to the end. In other states, it's different. And so you got to read your state, read the state law, and also read your lease. Because the leases we use talk about what to do if the tenant dies. So just read your lease. If it's a boilerplate lease from an attorney or whatever, probably refers to what happens if the tenant passes. So check that. So here are the highlights of this conversation are the things I don't want to have you guys miss on this thing. Is make sure you're collecting emergency contacts, because emergencies are not just what if the tenant passes away, but also the tenant doesn't pay their rent. If you have properties that are prone to hurricanes or tornadoes or natural disasters, hey, there's a hurricane coming and I can't get a hold of your relative, I need to let them know, something like that. Or the power's been out at the property for a day and there's an elderly person living in the property, emergency contact. So many reasons why you need to have this. The next thing is wait till you get contact with the executor and then give them the keys, not anybody else. Now, there's a whole other conversation that comes in, and this goes back to state law, where if there is no heir to the property, or if this is perhaps an elderly person who's didn't have any children or doesn't have any direct descendants or no will or whatever, in most states, the state becomes the executor, and you've got to work through probate law and stuff like that to get in touch with the state to find out. But by no means anywhere in any of these laws does it say that you as a landlord have the right to go enter the property on your own and start taking the tenant's possessions and disposing of them, selling them, let them becoming your own, pocketing a security deposit and say, okay, this unit's now vacant, and I'm going to go put the next tenant in there. It's not the right thing to do from a, doing unto others perspective, but it's also not legal, okay? So if any of you are thinking of okay, just forget it, the tenant's passed away, let me just vacate the unit and put it on the market for a new tenant, it's definitely not the right thing to do, and it's also, I guarantee you, it's not the legal thing to do either. So anyway, in that place, if it's a month-to-month lease that cancels immediately, you still have to contact the executor. All it means is they're not liable for months and months worth of rent after the person passes away. That's all that means, but it doesn't mean that you get to go enter the property and take their stuff, even if it's a month-to-month contract, okay? So that's it, guys. Again, I hope this doesn't happen to you, but if you're a landlord long enough, probability says that it will. And again, it's happened to us a few times. It's not a happy thing. The best you can do is to try and be a human to the person on the other end, and help them get through it, help them mitigate it, and hopefully it doesn't damage your business that you end up not having any damage to your property or to your income, but also that you're able to take care of someone who had probably an unexpected loss, right? So that's it. Again, not a happy topic, but it's something that we all need to discuss as a what if in this business. So, and again, if you guys like what I have to say, you want to maybe share a story of something like this that happened to you guys, share it in the comments section. We'd love to hear, some stories you guys may have had happen. And as I always say, appreciate you guys and have a great and profitable week.